It's safe to say that having options is great, but making choices can be pretty difficult. The Subaru Crosstrek offers a healthy variety of configurations. Starting at $26,000, there are more affordable subcompact SUVs. However, just like a credit card after you put yourself in debt, the Subaru Crosstrek rewards you for your spending. Not in redeemable points for overpriced hotels, but instead, substance. Every model comes standard with the best all-wheel drive system in the segment and fully independent suspension. Some of its competitors don't offer either of those things. While I cover the nuances a little more closely in my full review, where Subaru holds back on the Crosstrek is mainly features and material choices. Today I'm going to drive both powertrains along with the heavily revised Wilderness trim. Before I do that, I'd like to thank the kind people over at the Royal on the Eastside service department for letting me test drive their loaner Crosstreks for today's video. Whether you want expert care of your ride or you're looking for a new one at an aggressive price, check out Royal East in Bloomington, Indiana. First up is the bulk-selling 2-liter premium spec. 152 horsepower, 145 pound-feet of torque is just enough to motivate a crossover that's just above 3,000 pounds. Mated to it is, you guessed it, a continuously variable transmission. For this year, they dropped the 6-speed manual transmission option, which is genuinely predictable. The EPA rated them horribly when it came to gas mileage, which I think is why Subaru didn't really build very many of them, so even if you did want one, it required a lot of searching. The transmission itself was flawed, but it was such a fun little car to drive, and it would have paired up really nicely with the improvements they've made for this generation. Here in the Crosstrek, the powertrain is an appliance. That said, let's find out what the real-world performance is. Strangely enough, this got off the line better than I've seen from Subarus in the past. Still, its guts do begin to die out. 0 to 60 came up in 9.1 seconds. That's on par with the base power plants of key competitors. This CVT just does what you want it to do. The response is timely. It doesn't hold at a low RPM and lug the engine. This helps the passing power feel okay, I suppose, but as you'd expect, it lacks that direct, linear feel of something like the 6-speed automatic in the Mazda CX-30. If we're talking Subaru, we need to talk about why their drivetrains have earned a cult following. At the base is a Boxer 4-cylinder. That lowers the center of gravity, which improves the handling without giving it a stiffer ride. It's also longitudinally mounted, which is something that you're not going to find in basically all front-wheel drive cars. This makes it easier for Subaru to provide equal-length drive shafts, which improves the balance. This system is also full-time, and it can send well over 50% of torque to the front or rear axle. Subaru also offers X mode. With the 2-liter model, this will only come with one mode, which is snow and dirt. So this can basically intervene with the brakes and the throttle to help clamp down on spinning wheels and send torque to the wheels with traction. While X mode does other things, its main function is similar to what we've seen from many of its competitors. But where its foes can't quite match, the Crosstrek is on a bad road. Hitting several bumps one after another, the ride is never jittery. While it doesn't float over everything, your small to medium-sized imperfections don't pester the cabin, and this even handles potholes like a champ. And it's not too shabby on a back road either. The steering reacts quickly, and it's precise. There's none of that vagueness on center that you got with the previous generation. The steering is light, there's a little bit of feedback there too, and you can take it over bad roads, around corners, and that suspension tuning is marvelous. Not only is it forgiving, it's also controlled. I wouldn't label it as aggressive on a back road, but compared to all of its competitors that have driven, this one feels the most confident. While it may take you like 20 seconds to get up to a felony speed, driving it around town, pulling up to highway speeds, I don't really have complaints, but my opinion would probably change if I was driving it at high elevation with other people in the car. If you're living in that kind of scenario, I may recommend the 2.5. Here in the Crosstrek, the Subaru's 2.5 makes 182 horsepower, so let's line it up and see what this can do. Interesting. So that definitely felt slower off the line. I don't know why, for whatever reason, the tuning just did not let it get the beans. I might try it one more time, but not in the sport mode. And I got the exact same result, which is a bit odd. So for reference, Car and Driver hit 60 in about 8.1 seconds when they tested a sport trim. Still, you're not buying one of these to get the best numbers out there. So what about how it feels? Despite its increased potency, you don't really notice the extra displacement around town. It's only when you go to merge onto the highway or quickly pass someone that you'll certainly feel the difference. To accompany the increased acceleration is the same song and dance from the growling boxer and continuously variable transmission. It's smooth from a takeoff, something that older Subarus with this transmission kind of struggled with, and for an all-wheel drive SUV, it does get great gas mileage. In fact, if you go with the 2.5 liter, you only lose 1 mile per gallon in the city and highway. Plus, the all-wheel drive gains a second X mode, this one dubbed Deep Snow and Mud. This mode will allow for a little more wheel spin to get you out of even trickier situations. And with the non-wilderness specs, you still have a segment-topping 8.7 inches of ground clearance. Now, the sport trim I'm driving might not give you a more racy suspension, but this thing still feels ready to dance. So I mentioned earlier that Subaru does skimp out when it comes to materials and features. Now on the outside, this is well appointed with standard painted door handles, alloy wheels. Most of them will have proximity unlock and lock too, but there are a few features missing, like for instance a power rear gate or a 360 view camera system. There's also no heated steering wheel, no digital gauge cluster, head-up display, ventilated seats. This is supposed to be an affordable car, and it's already just on the cusp of that. So I can see why they wouldn't add more costs. The materials themselves, this is largely covered in plastic or vinyl material. I do like the cloth here, but really this gets blown away by the Mazda CX-30 or Honda HR-V when it comes to an upscale feel. Granted, if you spend more and get the 2.5, all of the trims will come with enhancements like a leather-wrapped wheel and shifter, more contrast stitching, and heated seats, but now we're over 30 grand. Plus, the whole cabin is centered around this large touchscreen that doesn't have a great response time, just an adequate resolution. At least it's simply laid out and it doesn't embed all of the HVAC controls. But for a car that feels otherwise analog, I would really appreciate more physical inputs. So while it doesn't feel too expensive and you're not pampered with crazy amenities, the cabin does do a few important things well. This feels durable. The construction of everything is solid for the price point. It feels like it'll all be really easy to clean. The seats are much more comfortable than they were in years past, and they do offer lumbar adjustments, something that you again have to pay extra for, but I'm happy to see it. And someone that's 6'3" like myself can fit in both rows with a cargo space that's still more than class competitive. So now it has the size and the seats to be accommodating for a road trip, and even up at highway speed, this is comfortable. Road noise is subdued, wind noise isn't too bad. For 30 grand, this is quiet. The Crosstrek Wilderness may utilize the same powertrain, but it receives an extensive list of upgrades. On the outside, we have more ground clearance, now 9.3 inches. The bumpers were redesigned to increase the approach and departure angles. There's also, of course, some styling flair added in too, like anodized copper accents to mark some of the recovery points. These roof rails can accommodate heavier items like a rooftop tent. We also have some mild all-terrain tires, and on the inside, there's a little bit more of that style treatment along with Subaru's durable StarTex upholstery to make it even easier to clean. Behind the wheel of the Crosstrek, you may feel some of its other advantages, like a more aggressive final drive ratio. Paired up with the same continuously variable transmission, that's not something that you're going to notice much of on road, but when you're off-road, that's going to pair up with a low-speed gradient mode built within X mode that will basically sense when you're crawling and then hold its most aggressive ratio. That's kind of a clever way to make a CVT perform better on a trail. There are a couple of other drivetrain tweaks too. The rear differential is revised with larger fins and what appears to be an over-temperature switch to keep it cool and prevent damage. And beyond that, this does come with an oil cooler for the CVT. This means that it can actually tow up to 3,500 pounds, which is over double that of a standard Crosstrek, though I'm not sure I would recommend doing that. I am curious to see how the Wilderness puts the power to the ground. So this car did the exact same thing. And I mean, it only has 2,500 miles, so there shouldn't be anything wrong with it, but it just didn't really bite off the line. This time, 0 to 60 came up in 8.6 seconds though, despite its identical stutter. Maybe that's thanks to the final drive ratio. But once again, more important is passing power, and that's something that you're just going to get much more of with either of the 2.5 liters. But below 30 miles per hour, all of its advantage seems to go away. This also comes with more suspension travel to increase articulation, but the different spring rates and dampening should help this feel softer on a back road. Driving them back to back, the Wilderness does feel quite forgiving. It really does take all of this on the chin, maybe a hair better than even the standard Crosstrek. The idea is that this ride will be less fatiguing on long, unpaved roads. From what I've seen off-road, all of these changes have taken the Crosstrek from outdoorsy to more capable than a car like this should ever be. Even with these changes, it's going to still be limited by wheel articulation and the fact that it's still not going to have a proper locking differential, as much as the brake vectoring does help. With the changes made to the Wilderness, it seems like you lose just a little bit of the steering feel, and it's ever so slightly less eager to turn in. That said, the steering does retain its precision, and going around corners, you can hit imperfections, and it honestly feels just as stable, with body roll well under control. And with any Crosstrek, these truly feel like a lifted hatchback, one with great visibility. It's easy to see out of and maneuver. I love that Subaru makes a properly petite car that can still get people through harsh terrain. Most of the time, if you want something with this kind of capability, you're getting a fairly large, inefficient, expensive vehicle. And at like 33 grand, the Wilderness isn't half bad. Though do take note that if you get the optional package and a bunch of accessories, this thing can climb up over 36 grand. And at that point, it's kind of a hard sell for a Crosstrek. Plus, two features are absent here that you do have in other Wilderness Subarus. In the US, there is no front camera to monitor obstacles, and there's no full-size spare tire, just a compact unit. Outside of the middling value proposition compared to the Forester, I'm impressed by the Wilderness. And up at 65 miles per hour, the tires of the Wilderness don't really speak up. This would still be a good highway vehicle, though it will cost more to fuel. When choosing an individual Crosstrek model, I was expecting the powertrain to be a pretty big factor, but after driving them back to back, there's really not as much of a difference as I was expecting. While I think a lot of people would appreciate the 2.5 liter, most could live without it. Though if I had to personally spend my money on one, I would go with the sport trim, partially for the engine, but what seals the deal is that I get a few more features that are optional with the 2 liter at just a small cost up front and at the pump. If you don't care about a bunch of amenities or needing more time to get up to speed, you'll probably be happy with the lesser engine. The Wilderness is the unicorn of the bunch. There's a high buy-in for a Crosstrek, but its thorough list of upgrades doesn't just give it capability, it adds character, and at least in today's tests, makes it the quickest. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then please leave a like to help me sneak into the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe and hit the notification bell for more fun, detailed car content without fluff. Consider becoming a member for an additional podcast and to help me take this to another level. I'll catch you in the next one.